And then he says, verse 9, then the Lord your God will prosper you abundantly in all the work of your hand, in the offspring of your body, the offspring of your cattle, the produce of your ground. For the Lord will again rejoice over you for good, just as he rejoiced over your fathers, if you obey the Lord your God to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book. If you turn to the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. Now watch very closely in verse 11. For this commandment, which I command to you today, it is not too difficult for you. It is not out of reach. Galatians 5:3 doesn't say it's impossible to keep the law. There's an atonement law because he knew they were not going to, because the sin nature makes it impossible for you to be perfect. Please get out of your mind the Christian statement that if I kept all the laws, I'd be perfect. When I say I haven't made these laws too difficult for you, they include the body of law as to how to deal with the fact that the sin nature will constantly manifest itself. Does that make sense? So from the beginning, God never expected perfection. He expected allegiance. What's the difference? Believers, what's the difference? Does he expect you to walk every day with perfection? He expects you to walk with him, not just his rules. He wants you to care about when you've offended him, not simply walk along like doing the wrong thing is okay with him. God doesn't get out of his chair upset with you until you decide that wrong is really right, right is really wrong, and you can live that way and you're perfectly comfortable with it. As long as you are inflicted with the guilt and you go back to conviction, and that conviction leads you to change, that's what we call a walk with God. All right, I want to just give you, by way of introduction to Deuteronomy, on the front flap of Deuteronomy in your Bible, you may want to have a couple of notes. First, let's just talk about the authorship of the book. It's clear that the internal evidence of the book argues that Moses is the author, but the ending, in my view, proves that there was an editor involved in the book. Don't be the Sunday school Christian that is concerned about the idea that someone else touched the book after Moses. What Moses gave us were the leaves of what God had done. But let's suppose that Joshua, or maybe Samuel, or maybe even as late as Ezra, somebody cleaned up the narrative and put it in the order that we have it today. Don't let that bother you. In fact, if you look closely, I'm one of those guys who does not believe that Moses sat there weeping over the story of his own death as he wrote how he died. I think somebody else put that on the book. But I don't think you need to worry about that. I think the fact that some Psalms are written by people and you don't know who they're written by doesn't make them not God's word. The line between believers and non-believers in terms of the evangelical sense of the Bible is this God's word, not did Moses write it? Don't get yourself caught up in the authorship arguments. Because the fact of the matter is, it's pretty clear to me that somebody added to this discussion. Let me just show that to you. First of all, when in verses 1 through 5, you find out that these claim to be the words of Moses spoke in Transjordan. That is the opposite side of the Jordan from where Eretz Israel, or the land of Israel, is today. It's in what today would be the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. Now, the point is that in the opening verses, these are the words of Moses, but they're from the opposite side, not coming into the land, because Moses was told he couldn't come into the land, right? And if you look very carefully, you'll find also in 4:44 to 49, chapter 4, verses 44 to 49, that some of these were given by Moses opposite of Beit Peor in the land of Sihon, and some of them in 29:1 were given in the land of Moab, which means in the area east of the Dead Sea, north of the halfway point, which is a deep wadi that cuts the Dead Sea in half. The important thing is this. These are things from the east side of the Jordan River given by Moses. That's their essential seed form. But Moses also says in the book that he wrote things that are being said in the book. For instance, if you were to look in 31, verses 1 and 2, This is Deuteronomy 31, verses 1 and 2. I would make a note in the beginning of Deuteronomy to say that Moses claims, I am 121 years old, and I am no longer able to come and go, and I'm not allowed to cross into the Jordan. And it's clear that he's making reference that he's the author and he's the one who met with God and spoke concerning these things. Now, the interesting thing is that if you go back to the first chapter and look at those first few verses, what you will find in them is a clue as to when this book is put together. You see in verses 2 and 3 of chapter 1, it is 11 days' journey from Horeb by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, I'm having trouble with my words again. On the first day of the 11th month, Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all that the Lord had commanded him to give them. Let me just have you zero in on the verse 2 where it says it was an 11-day journey. Here's what I want you to see. This book, the theme of this book, is 40 years in replacement of 11 days. That's the theme. It could have taken us 11 days. Instead of taking us 11 days, it took us 40 years. That's the beginning of you're not going to believe what happened on our vacation. It should have took us 3 hours to get there. We got there in 3 days. Okay, it's one of those stories. So there's kind of a downbeat little smiley face next to verse 2 that says, hey, 11 years, 11 days, but it was replaced by 40 years. And so what you're supposed to do is walk away with a 40-year journey, replacing 11-day journey. Why is Kadesh Barnea mentioned? It's mentioned because from Kadesh Barnea, they move up with Numbers 13 and 14 and go up into the land, and they get the chance with the spies to go into the land from Kadesh Barnea up through the wilderness of Zin, up into the Hebron Plateau, and they go all the way up in there, and they get scared and they come back with their grapes. And the point is that fear is what stopped them from obedience. And by the way, that's what stops most believers from obedience. Can I just make the argument that many people marry the wrong person because they're afraid they won't find the right one? That many people will make a jump to whatever's easier because it's what's immediate. One of the things we have to understand about our walk with God is that God thinks in agricultural terms. It takes time. It takes doing the thing over many days correctly to get the right result. Some of you are athletic. You can take a good look at me and see that I'm not. But some of you are athletic, and you know this. You know the only way to become proficient athletically is not to go out in one afternoon and become proficient at whatever it is. It's to do it over the long haul and to continue to do right. It has something to do with your eating, I've heard. I don't really know what that would be, and then it also has something to do beyond nutrition. It has something to do with exercise, right? Now, most normal people, some of you aren't normal, but most normal people don't get that all fired excited about spinach, nutrition, and hard exercise. And in fact, in my life, most of the people that exercise spend more time moaning than the people that don't. Why? Because if you exercise, you hurt. So it seems counterintuitive that the way to get better is to deny myself things I want and hurt myself regularly. But that's what we call exercise proficiency. My point is this. In almost every case in the Bible where God is at work, he does things by, what I want you to do is wait for my first rain, then go rip up the soil. Yeah, then what? Then wait. Then I want you to drop seed in the soil. Yeah, then what? Then wait. And I want you to water the soil. Yeah, then what? Wait. So there's this long, protracted way that God does work. Do you understand why it's so much easier to sell unbelief? Do what you want, dump all the sugar in your body, deal with it now, and then how does the world compensate for unbelief? A set of pharmaceuticals that will quell the symptoms of whatever you did. Day after pills for gluttony. In other words, what we try to do is curb the symptom rather than solving the problem, because solving the problem requires a long-term view of life. So, When I look at verse 2, what I see is a smiley face. Yeah, it was only 11 days up to that place where we sent in the spies and then we could have walked in. That's not really how the story went. Let me tell you the story. And that's really what Deuteronomy does. It tells you the law, the stipulations of the law, set into a larger story of how 11 days turned into 40 years. Now, what's interesting is, often in the book, particularly in the first 4 chapters, but often in the book, Moses refers to himself as we. We did this. And I could give you a slew of verses, or I and you, or our time together, us. But then there are a couple of others that are like in 8:18, to this day. You have this phrase that gets dropped in. There seems to be a discussion that adds to the idea that there's an editor coming into this work. Why would the simple phrase, to this day, tell you that it's not Moses that's doing the final work on the book? It's obviously somebody much, much later, because Moses would not have said that. It would not have made sense to say, it is like that to this day, on the day that he's writing. Well, yeah, because it happened yesterday. Why wouldn't it be like that today? But obviously, so for instance, take a look in chapter 2 for a minute. Turn to chapter 2, verses 10 through 12, and listen to these verses with me. In verse 10, it says, if I can find it, let's see. I'll start back in verse 9. Then the Lord said to me, do not harass Moab, nor provoke them to war, nor will I will not give you any of the land as a possession, because I have given Ar to the sons of Lot as a possession. Verse 10. The Emim lived there formerly, a people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also regarded as Rephaim, but the Moabites call them Emim. So you have this kind of wandering off and explaining there used to be this people, now there's this people, but this people calls the old people that. What is that about? Well, it may be prior to the time of Moses, but that seems unnatural to the reading. What it seems like is that there are some Anakim giants, there are some of the leftover second wave Nephilim that we talked about that are in the land of Hebron and the Hebron Plateau, and there's also some over in Transjordan over in the Moabite territory. In other words, this is a mopping up of a second wave of a Nephilim infiltration after the Noah incident. And the bottom line is all we have are these words about it. But my point about the words are they seem to be a drop-in or an insert to try and explain something. Whenever somebody puts a parentheses into a text and says, by the way, this is the way it used to be and now it's this way, it makes you feel like this is an editor trying to explain an original text after the fact. It looks like an editorial note. Now, you can't prove it from that, but you can go to chapter 3, verse 14, and you can see something that may suggest the same kind of thing. Yair, the son of Manasseh, took all the region of Argob as far as the border of the Geshurites and the Maachathites, and it is called, that is, Bashan, after his own name. Havot Yair, as it is to this day. So it sounds like Havot Yair is after they've settled the land and they've renamed things. Let me say it this way. One of the ways you see an editor's fingerprints in the narrative is this. They tend to update the names of places. Now, are there notes on the date of the work? Because you might want to know when this book was written. So let me give you a couple of just skipping across the top. Again, if you write down notes about the authorship and about the editors and about the date, here's where this helps you. You get into a Bible study and somebody says, yeah, well, my teacher in college told me that these things all came at the time of Hezekiah. No, some of them say they came from Moses. So what a person is saying when they say that is that the writing is no longer historically authentic. They're saying they disagree with the Bible. Newsflash, you're allowed. You want to disagree with the Bible, fine, but you cannot say it is the rule of faith and practice and it's historically legitimate, except for I only get to choose which verses are historically legitimate. You got to take a position on this thing. So by knowing Moses is stated in your notes in the beginning, that'll help you. But then you don't want to be that Sunday school Christian who came up with, Moses wrote it out and he put chapter 1, verse 1 and began writing. Because that's not how it works either. This thing is more complicated than that. Truth often is. Let's give you a little bit of a sketch of how things started. What we know for sure, the date of the Exodus is set because 1 Kings tells the story in 1 Kings 6 through 8 of the date of the beginning of the temple. And it tells you that God had started the temple, and it gives you a length of time since the Exodus from Egypt. And since we have a benchmark on the temple, we know how to count back to 430 years and get the time period for the Exodus. The Exodus, by that dating, is a 1446 BCE event. If you take the Bible literally, that is the date. Now, if that's the case, the internal record of the chronology from Egypt to Moab is a reconstruction that gets you to the date 1406 for Deuteronomy. So you might want to put down 1406, but now let me tell you how I got there so you don't just put it down and somebody goes, well, how'd you get that? I don't know, my teacher told me. That's not the answer, okay? First, you have inside the narrative that the people departed from Egypt on the 15th day of the first month as they walk out of Egypt, which we know to be the month of Nisan, and we know to be Nisan 15 in the year 1446, and that will be Exodus chapter 12. The dating of Exodus 12, the dating of we quit Egypt today, lock, stock, and bagels, out we go, that dating is given in Exodus chapter 12, verses 2 and verse 5. And in Numbers 33:3, we see the comparison of that date. So here's what I want you to know. The people got to the mountain of the law first 50 days later. That was Exodus 19. But beyond the Exodus 19 experience, we know that they got there, and it says Exodus 19 verse 1, 50 days later they come to the mountain of the law, and it gives you the date. It gives you the first day of the third month. So they left on the 15th day of the first month. They arrived 50 days later at the first day of the third month of year one of their journey out. That year then puts them there in the spring-summer of 1446. When they arrived at Mount Sinai, it was summertime. I can tell you about summer in Mount Sinai. The words boiling hot comes to mind. 134 in the broad daylight, then swoops down after the sun goes down, and it will drop 40 to 50 degrees inside of 2 hours. The reason is there's no cloud cover. So all the heat evacuates off the surface, which means you are absolutely blessed, hot all day, with an arc between about 90 when the sun's low in the sky, up to 135, back down to 90. And then when the sun evacuates, that 90 will drop to 50. So you are hot all day and freezing cold all night. In other words, it's an extreme environment. That'd be a fair way to say it, right? So in this extremity, they are there at the time the extremity of heat is coming on. They are at the base of Mount Sinai. Now, if you kept reading, you would make note that in Exodus 40, remember what's in Exodus 40? 25 to 40 is the section on what? The tabernacle. And by the time they're actually putting up and operating the tabernacle and God is inhabiting it, that is 9 months later. So they have been parked there for 9 months. I know that because Exodus 40:17 gives you a time. It says it was the first day of the first month of the second year. So they are now a year out of Egypt, and they spent 9 months parked at the bottom, and now they've got a tabernacle and it's operating. Now, just before they go to make preparations to leave, meanwhile, back up on the mountain, during that 9-month period, there's a 1-month interval where the tabernacle is getting finished, but there's still work to be done on the priesthood. And so for 1 month of that period of time, there's a time when in spring of 1445, when Moses is up on top of the mountain, and what he's doing is getting the book of Leviticus. And so when, in your opening chapter of Leviticus, we already told that story. But here's the important part. I know that in Numbers 1:1 and in Exodus 40:17, that they start to get the promised land vision, and they start to be told to get their act together in Numbers 1:1 in the spring of 1445. Now, Numbers opens with a census and says, all right, it's kind of the circle the wagons, we're getting ready for wagons ho. And for the first 10 chapters, there's preparation to get ready. That's the book of Numbers. But in Deuteronomy, they're going to start telling you the story later on. Deuteronomy is a story, as best I can tell you, that is set at the time of 1406, 1405, and it's set in the Transjordan, and it's set at the end of the 40th year of the journey. So if you've got 1446 starting the journey, fast forward 40 years, you get down to 1406, and that seems to be, it's January or February of 1406. They have now gone through the whole 40 years of what should have taken them 11 days, and instead they are now standing overlooking the promised land. There's a lot more that could be said about that, but what's important is this. We know that Aaron died, according to Numbers 33:38, in the 40th year of the journey. We know that Deuteronomy is largely dispensed during that year. And if you read carefully the book of Numbers, you will find that the laws that were given during that time match the Deuteronomic law as they're preparing to go in the land. Okay, lots of words. So what's in the book? What's the book about? We have a book that's created in 1406, written by Moses. We have the parting counsels of Moses. We've called it what kind of law? What code of law is it? It is constitutional code. In other words, it's focused on how God wants moral judgment to be worked out in the frame of a national testimony. How does he want people to know him during the time of the Hebrew Scriptures? He wants them to know him primarily by the moral code that's reflected in the constitution of what makes a Jew a Jew. And so what's important is that the land of promise was unconditionally given to Abraham and to his seed in Genesis 13:15 and in Genesis 15:7, as well as other places. The land was given to him to them in title. However, the domicile, the occupation of the land, they have the title to the land, but living in the land is dependent upon their obedience, right? So the domicile covenants are specified in constitutional code of law. Specifically, when you get to the end of the code, in Deuteronomy 28, 29, 30, you're going to start seeing the conditional covenant. The condition of the covenant is obey and you get the land, disobey and I will kick the stuffings out of you. Like Leviticus 26 said in detail, the Levitical code is again reminded at the end of the Deuteronomic constitutional code, and it says, do what I'm telling you to do and you'll have life, peace, prosperity, longevity. You will have all of the things that you need and you will be a testimony for me to the world. But in contradistinction, don't do what I told you to do and I'll send you all the way out into the world, and then I will restore you. When your heart is broken, I will bring you back. I will call you from all corners of the world, and I'll bring you back. Restoration is in every one of the conditional covenant statements. You will not find that people talk about it when it says, yeah, you either do this or I'll kick you out, and they leave the story there. God never did. He always said, and then I'll find you and bring you back. You will find it in Leviticus 26. You will find it again in Deuteronomy when we pick up and look at Deuteronomy. Okay, so what's important is the rest of the Hebrew Scriptures tell you the story of exactly the prophetic truth of Moses' mouth. The reason that they recognize no prophet like Moses had come is because Moses was prophetic. He said, here's how it's going to go. You're going to disagree with my law and disobey my law, and then your land is going to be disrupted. And 1 Kings tells the story of how they did exactly that. And by chapter 12, the country breaks up and they're at each other's throat. But then he says, if you continue to behave like that, I'm going to cast you out of the land. And 2 Kings tells the story of how they begin to be cast out of the land, and they end up, by the end of the period of the Hebrew Scriptures, off in foreign lands. But the same covenant that said, if you disobey, you'll be removed, also said you'll be restored. What's interesting is that you will find, if you look carefully at the covenant of the domicile, it ends in the complete, full heart restoration of the people, which I would argue hasn't happened yet. People can say, well, they came back from Babylon. Yes, but included in it is I will put a new heart within you, and you will live the truth. I see no record that that's how they behaved. In fact, I see another record of another stumble. I see another record of self-willed, self-minded people that end up back in another national catastrophe under Rome and are again dispersed out into the nations. And it's interesting that in the domicile agreements that we're going to read about in Deuteronomy, you find that the people are in every part of the earth, not in Babylon, but in every part of the earth, not in Rome, but in every part of the earth. You can make a much easier case for the Roman diaspora and the dispersion of the Jews than you can that the Assyrians and Babylonians is what he's talking about. Because they weren't in every part of the earth. They were in one part of the earth. So all I'm saying to you is the promise is unmovable. Abraham was asleep. That land is titled to Israel in perpetuity, not because of who they are or how they perform, but because God said so. But behind that promise is you don't get to have the keys to the car that's titled to you unless you do what I say. In fact, let me just be prophetic, you're not going to do what I say. And I'm going to take those keys from you, and I'm going to kick the stuffings out of you. And if you remember in Leviticus, it was 7 times, 7 times, 7 times, 7 times, 7 times, setting up the reason why the tribulation period is drawn out that way in Revelation chapters 6 through 19. The important thing is this. Although they were told they would lose the land, they were always told they would get it back. And so we should look for that. All right, let's get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the book. First, in the first 4 chapters of the book, I want you to understand that the book of Deuteronomy, in its original form, was actually a series of speeches. The speeches themselves start with a preamble and move to a prologue of the faithfulness of a king. And in chapters 1 through 4 match this treaty style. Now, let me tell you what's going on here. The boxes reflect the overall picture of the projection of how the book is working. But the treaties, there was a treaty style called a suzerainty treaty that was very common early on during the Hittite kingdom and forward. And what you have is a treaty between a lord and some vassals. This is a great lord, a great emperor, if you will, has a treaty with various vassals. And that treaty always was set up in 5 parts. The first part of every suzerainty treaty was a preamble. The second part of it was a prologue that gave you some of the conditions under which the king had shown himself faithful, and the faithfulness of the king is celebrated. The third part of a suzerainty treaty that comes contemporary from the time of Moses and the time before Moses and the time of Abraham was that a series of stipulations are put in that treaty. That is, these are the conditions. All right. I want to say that we have a great king. I want to say that we have a great covenant together. Let me tell you about the faithfulness of our king and how wonderful he is. Then the third part was always, here are the conditions under which the king will continue to be our guardian. This is the way a suzerainty treaty reads. Then we have the penalties and rewards. Here's what happens if we don't follow that king and we don't follow after his rewards. Here's what happens if we do. Here are the blessings we get if we do. And then finally, here's how legally there's a succession right that we are to acknowledge after the one who is giving us the message of the king. How do we then move to a succession right to the next one? This is a suzerainty treaty. It's a common treaty from the period of Abraham to the period of Moses, and they come from the period around the Hittite time and forward. And what's important for you to know is that the ending structure of Deuteronomy appears by many scholars to be a treaty that matches this idea. Okay? Don't lose your, sleep over, how exactly this works. What I'm saying is whenever it was edited to its final form, it appears to be edited to a final form of a covenant treaty. That's why we call this kind of literature legal code and covenant treaty. The constitutional code comes as a covenant treaty between a lord and his vassals. But the Lord in this case is the Lord of heaven. Now, what I want you to understand is it's given in a series of speeches. So in chapter 1 through 443, it's kind of like a singular speech. Let me give it to you another way. What's called by scholars the 5 speeches, to me, is actually 5 times Moses sits down and gathers the work into a single scroll. So we could call this a scroll or a speech. Then there's a really long one, 444 to 26:19, is the second speech or the second scroll. And that's the one that has all the stipulations. What we will call the 15 codes of law show up there. That is, I'm going to give you articles 1 through 15 of a legal document that looks like a constitution and reads like a constitution, with a few case studies dropped in. There's a couple of varying verses, but basically that's the line of thinking. Then there's a section on what happens, and this section becomes what we often refer to as the Palestinian covenant. I don't like that terminology because I think it's preloaded with some modern historical interpretation. But what I'm going to call the domicile covenant. How do you get to live there? And what are the stipulations going to yield in terms of penalties and rewards? And you'll see that in 27 through 30. And that's your third speech. Then succession rights become your fourth speech, and that's 31 and 32. And then finally, the fifth one has to do with blessings that come with the death of Moses, what happened as a result of one who was so great and led us. So you've got these 5 speeches or 5 scrolls that look like organization. Clearly the last part seems to me to be edited later, but I would say the final form of this is either set up to look like this covenant treaty, or it's set up to look like it based on original scroll materials that are behind it, and that's what you're seeing. Don't worry so much about this, but just be conversant to know what the story is. Because what I want you to see is what's up here. The boxes are what mean everything to me. And in the first 4 chapters, I want you to see that the whole thing is a review of the journey. Why is that an important factor? Well, let me suggest to you there's a formula behind the book. And the formula is the walk is going to be the first part of our formula, meaning a review of the journey and how we got to where we are and who we are and who's included in this. Plus, in verses 5 to 26, there's a whole set of statements of the 15 articles of law. Those are the articles, but I'm going to say the walk plus obedience, or lack thereof. This is the formula, plus the third section of the book, which is the constitutional affirming, the affirmation. It's the covenant that the people gave. Let me add a third word up here. Let me add loyalty. That is, that not only is this book going to tell us the walk, but the walk plus the articles that we are to obey, plus the loyalty that we are to affirm. And when we get to that point, what we should do is arrive at the blessings, and these are the last words. I'm going to use the word benefits. Let me say it this way. Behind the book is this formula. That is, that the walk of the believers together in obedience, when we add that to it, with loyalty to the King who got us here, will equal the benefits we're supposed to get. Let me say that this is the formula that is opposite of the formula of the book of Judges. The book of Judges is, when every man does that which is right in his own eyes, we end up in a mess. And it starts off with a political and spiritual fragmentation that ends up in a total mess by the end of the book. This book sort of gets better. It starts off with a bunch of people that's a rabble in the desert and the heat and the cold, and starts off with God giving them stipulations and teaching them. There are some remarkable parts of this book and some things I want you to look at when you see this book that I think actually helped me a great deal. And one of them, I think, is when you get down to the part of the book that deals specifically with the benefits. So what I'd like you to do is uncharacteristically, let's open our Bible to look at the Bible and go back to toward the end of the story. Let's go to the last part of chapter 29 of Deuteronomy, just by way of introduction to the book to help us understand something. Because it's going to help us with Numbers, it's going to help us with Galatians, it's going to help us with what we read in Hebrews. There is a mythology that Christians possess that the law was impossible to keep. The law was not impossible to keep. Believe it or not, it's actually possible for you to walk through life and not lie. It's possible for you to walk through life and not steal. I didn't say it wasn't hard. I said it's possible. Have any of you gotten to this point of the day and haven't told a lie yet? Many of you. Wow, you've gotten several hours and you haven't told a lie. Have any of you gotten to this point, have most of you gotten to this point in the day and you haven't stolen anything yet today? Okay, don't give me the idea that the law was this mountain that was too high for anyone to climb. That's not what it says. Follow me in 29:29. Put a box around 29:29 because it's an important key verse to what God is going to say. He says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God. That is, there are unrevealed truths in the universe. Does anybody have trouble believing there are unrevealed truths in the universe? One of them is like, how my wife thinks and things like that. Okay? There are deep thoughts. But he said, seriously, he says, but the things revealed belong to us and our sons forever. That is, the believer, the one who's walking with God, gets more truth on which to base their life than the unbeliever. The unbeliever walks through life with blinders on because they have chosen not to believe what God has said. You do not get the blessing of God until you believe that he is, and that he is the one who is the rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Let me add a layer to that. The level to which you get that depth is the level to which you seek him. And it's not just academic, although the part of it is academic. You have to read it, you have to know it. But the other part is you have to believe it. So in verse 29, he says there are two standards for what people know. There are secret things that belong to the Lord, but those who want to know the secrets of God, those who want to have them exposed, are those that are his sons. And he says, and the purpose of them is so that we can run around telling the rest of the world what they don't know. No. What does the end of the verse say? What is the purpose of knowing God's secrets? That we would obey, observe, that we would do them. In other words, the end of biblical knowledge is lifestyle. The end of biblical knowledge is shoe leather. It's not the ability to argue apologetics better. It's the ability to live better so that people listen to your argument. So he says, the secret things belong to the Lord, but the things revealed belong to us and our sons forever. That is, those who are following after God will actually, in fact, get that truth, and then it will produce that we may observe all the words of this law. Now, if it's impossible to observe all the words of this law, then it's a fool's errand to begin with. But I want you to go a little bit further. Notice the details of the domicile arrangement. Put in there somewhere that this is not about whether God will still love the Jewish people. He will love the Jewish people. This is not about whether he will finish the program that he gave to Abraham. He will finish the program. This is about what's going to happen to them in the program and how you're going to know they're getting through it. Okay? So in verse 1 it says, on that basis, so it shall be, when all of these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you call them to mind in all nations where the Lord your God has banished you, that is, so when you fail at doing this, and he kind of opens up with a kind of a low note, by the way, when you find yourself the last team on the list of teams for win-loss, when you find yourself at the bottom, would you remember this? When that has happened, verse 2, and you return to the Lord your God and obey him with all your heart and soul according to all that I command you today and your sons, then, so when you fail, plus then you repent, equals then at that point, the Lord your God will restore you from captivity and have compassion on you and will gather you again from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you. The Jewish people in their scattering is not a factor of Rome, Babylon, or Assyria. It's a factor of God's using those countries to scatter Jewish people around the world. God says, I'm the one who scatters you when you don't listen. Then it says in verse 4, if your outcasts are at the ends of the earth, look at that. It doesn't say Babylon. If your outcasts are all the way at the ends of the earth, from there the Lord your God will gather you. From there he will bring you back. But look what happens. The Lord your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. He will prosper you and multiply you. But that doesn't answer the whole problem, because moreover, or in addition to, or can I say later, after that, the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, that you might live. And at that time, as he's gathering you in, as he's changing your heart, verse 7, the Lord your God will inflict these curses on your enemies and on those who hate you, who persecuted you. And you shall obey the Lord and observe all his commandments, which I command you today. So he says, what's coming is a defection. What's coming from that defection is a dispersion. What's coming from that dispersion is a captivity. What's coming from that captivity is a repentance. What's coming from that repentance is the beginning of the memories that God had a land for us, and they begin to return to that land. What comes out of that is I begin to then prosper you, not because you have the right heart yet, that comes 2 verses later, but because I've decided to prosper you, because the kindness of the Lord leads us to repentance. And then all of a sudden I turn my eyes on the world and I begin to curse them. And what he doesn't say here, but later prophets will insert, is then they will blame you for what I do to them. The rising of anti-Semitic tradition. Every time Jews do better, the world will hate them for it. And as a result, he says, I will bring you in, and then eventually I will change your heart and all of you will obey me. There's a restoration in the domicile agreement. Everyone in the Christian church talks about how God said, if you don't obey, I'll throw you out. But they never point out that Leviticus 26, and again here in chapter 30 of Deuteronomy, God never says, I'll throw you out with, and then you will return. He always says that. He always has restoration at the end. And then he says, verse 9, then the Lord your God will prosper you abundantly in all the work of your hand, in the offspring of your body, the offspring of your cattle, the produce of your ground. For the Lord will again rejoice over you for good, just as he rejoiced over your fathers, if you obey the Lord your God to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book. If you turn to the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. Now watch very closely in verse 11. For this commandment, which I command to you today, it is not too difficult for you. It is not out of reach. Galatians 5:3 doesn't say it's impossible to keep the law. People walk around in Sunday school classes and adult Bible fellowships and Bible studies and act like God made a law that was too hard for anybody to keep. The problem is that's not what he says. He says it's possible for you to do what I want you to do. Why? Because the law not only includes don't lie, it includes mishpatim, or judgments as to how to recover when you do. The law is not an absolute be perfect. The law includes be perfect, and you're not gonna, so here's what to do when you're not. There's an atonement law because he knew they were not going to, because the sin nature makes it impossible for you to be perfect. Please get out of your mind the Christian statement that if I kept all the laws, I'd be perfect. When I say I haven't made these laws too difficult for you, they include the body of law as to how to deal with the fact that the sin nature will constantly manifest itself. Does that make sense? So from the beginning, God never expected perfection. He expected allegiance. What's the difference? Believers, what's the difference? Does he expect you to walk every day with perfection? He expects you to walk with him, not just his rules. He wants you to care about when you've offended him. Not simply walk along like doing the wrong thing is okay with him. God doesn't get out of his chair upset with you until you decide that wrong is really right, right is really wrong, and you can live that way and you're perfectly comfortable with it. As long as you are inflicted with the guilt and you go back to conviction, and that conviction leads you to change, that's what we call a walk with God. Or in other words, in my vocabulary, I call it Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. So when you get down here, look at verse 12. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven to get it for us and make us hear it, that we may observe it? I want you to write next to that verse 12, Luke 16. There's a simple story of the rich man and Lazarus. Do you remember the story? What's the story of the rich man and Lazarus? Who can tell me the story?
It's where the rich man dies.
Rich man dies. Lazarus has been doing what while the rich man was alive?
He was laying outside the gate.
He's laying outside the gate. He's not doing well. He's a poor guy.
Rich man doesn't help him.
They both die. Okay, and in the story, there are these two places. One is a place of comfort. The other one is a place of affliction. And there's a gulf fixed between them. And who can see who in this? Apparently they can see each other and even speak back and forth across the gulf. But in this scenario of the parable in Luke 16, what does the rich man want? What's the point of the parable?
He wants the poor man to go back and warn his brothers.
And what does Jesus say concerning the point of having somebody, the poor man? See, he still sees the poor man as serving his ends. That's one of the problems. Because it's so deeply enrooted in his life that he still thinks that poor man owes him to do something for him. But go beyond that. He cares about his brothers, right? He's a rich man, but he's not cold-hearted toward his family. What does he want him to do? Go back from the dead and speak for him. And what's the point of the narrative? What does Jesus say that closes Luke 16's parable? They have the law and the prophets. They don't need somebody back from the dead. They don't need somebody from heaven. They don't need somebody to skywrite. If they will not accept the word of Moses and they will not accept that which they have learned from their youth, if the word of God isn't enough, then they can come back from the dead and yet they will not believe. And Jesus could confidently say that. And then he got up from the tomb later on and he came back from the dead and still they did not believe. Why? Because he said right here exactly what Moses had said. It's not for heaven to do that. It's not for heaven to do that. Now, what's interesting is how the rabbis took that verse 12. The rabbis at the time of Jesus took that verse to say it's not up to heaven to decide. They actually took that verse to say it's up to the majority of the rabbis to decide. It is not for the heavens to decide, and they get that from here. That is exactly the opposite of what Jesus was trying to say in Luke 16 and what Moses was trying to say in verse 12. He's not trying to say heaven isn't involved in it. He's saying heaven said everything it needs to say. You can believe it or doubt. God isn't in the business of bargaining you into heaven. That's not what he's doing. He's not in the business of bargaining you into obedience. I think there's an awful lot of people in our culture who unfortunately grew up in the post-Dr. Spock era where all parents have to explain all rules to their children. God says, I'm God, deal with it. This is what I want you to do. And since I'm God, deal with it. And by the way, I don't have to convince you, but I'm going to tell you that if you do it, life is going to go better for you. Deal with it. And he said, I didn't make it too hard for you because I put in there a system for you to deal with all of the problems of your own heart. But then he says, I want you to understand, don't be going to heaven trying to get something more than I already gave you. Then go to verse 13. Don't go beyond the sea, that you should say, who will cross the sea for us to get it for us and make us hear it that we may observe it? But the word is very near you, in your mouth, in your heart, that you may observe it. He says in verse 14, the thing that I've been saying about the Christian life as long as I've walked in it. The problem isn't what I don't know. The problem is I don't do what I do know. How about you? The problem isn't that I need some new seminar to teach me a new way to look at the Bible. The problem is I need to do the things the Bible says and I don't want to. And not specifically just doing right, but remedying when I do wrong. But coming back in conviction and change when I do wrong. So there's a great story here. Now go down to verse 15 because I want to finish this up. See, I have set before you today What did I set before you? Hard things? No, life, prosperity, also death and adversity. In that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, keep his commandments, his statutes, and his mishpatim, his judgments, his fixes for when you don't, that you may live and multiply, that the Lord your God may bless you in the land you are entering in. But if your heart turns away, you will not obey. You are drawn into worship other gods and serve them. I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. You will not prolong your days in the land that you are living, where you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess it. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life in order that you may live, you and your descendants, by loving the Lord your God, by obeying his voice, by holding fast to him. Would you please understand that each part of verse 20 modifies the other part? In other words, you can tell me you love the Lord your God with all your heart, but that should include obedience. Why do you call me Lord and not do the things that I say? Jesus said. But that obedience isn't enough. God's word isn't only effectively lived by those who do everything right, or there would be precious few who are living God's truth. The fact of the matter is I've never met anybody who pulled it off. So the third phrase modifies the second. The third one is, and that you would hold fast to him. The point is, hold fast to me. In your attempts at obedience, make it holding fast not to your obedience or your ability, but holding fast to me. And the length of your days that you may live in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to give them. Do you notice that the end of this is that it's all about the length of your days to live in the land? It's about domicile. What he's saying is there is an unbreakable covenant of God with the children of Abraham. He will love them, he will care for them, but they will not get what he intends them to have if they will not hold fast to him. They will be broken away, scattered abroad, go through pain, and then be gathered up until they're ready to open their heart. There is no end point tragedy here, except for verse 2 of chapter 31. I'm 120 years old today. I'm no longer able to come and go. Moses goes, look, I got to get this over with. This preaching has been fun and all, but I'm 120 and I need to quit. So you end the book with a sense that God has laid out again these incredible blessings that come, or benefits that come. And that's what I want you to see the book as. Chapters 1 to 4, this is the review of the walk, to remind you that the law is always set in the walk of life. Then there's 15 codes of law. This is the standards of obedience so that you'll understand what is the mark you're shooting at. If we don't give you any rules, you're going to say, well, I'm doing okay because you don't have any rules. But when you know what the rules are, you can benchmark whether or not you need conviction and change or whether or not you're doing fine. And he says, so the walk plus obedience. And then there's an affirmation of the loyalty to the covenant so that you understand that your loyalty is not just to a standard of law, but to a grasping of the hand of God. As he holds you, you hold him back and say, I want to walk with you. And how does that end? That ends with a 120-year-old guy who goes, you know, I'm tired, but this has been a great ride. It ends with the blessings of obedience.
What if I told you there's a hidden guide, an ancient source of wisdom sitting right in front of us, yet so many overlook it or worse, underestimate its power? Imagine a book that holds the keys to life's most important questions. How should I live? Who should I trust? How do I find true peace and purpose? This isn't just another self-help book or a quick motivational fix. This is the Book of Proverbs, an ancient collection of truths written under divine inspiration, meant to unlock a life that's rich with meaning and purpose. But here's the thing, Proverbs doesn't just tell us what to do, it takes us deeper. It pulls back the curtain on our daily lives, exposing the choices we face and revealing the true paths that lead to fulfillment or destruction. If you're like most people, you might be tempted to treat Proverbs as nice advice, a list of wise sayings, maybe even a little outdated. But what if I told you these teachings aren't just practical tips, but spiritual insights that have the power to transform the very foundation of your life? These Proverbs aren't here to just inspire you for a day. They're here to reshape your heart, to bring you into alignment with God's eternal truth, and to equip you to handle life's hardest challenges with strength and grace. If I were you, I'd put down every motivational video or self-help podcast and start each morning with this wisdom. Words that not only encourage you, but draw you closer to God Himself, the true source of all understanding. We're going to dive into each topic so you can come back and dig deeper as you let these teachings sink into your soul. And by the end of this journey, you'll see the world differently. You'll understand life through the lens of God's wisdom. So if you're ready to unlock the full potential of your faith, grab a pen, settle in, and prepare for a journey that will challenge you, inspire you, and, if you let it, change your life. If this video brings you value, share it with others, because the wisdom in Proverbs isn't just for you. It's a gift to be passed on, a light in a dark world, calling us all back to the truth and strength found only in God. Let's uncover Proverbs together, here on Deep Bible Stories, where wisdom isn't just ancient, it's alive and waiting for us. What exactly is the Book of Proverbs? Many people see it as a list of wise sayings, practical tips, or a set of good ideas for life. But Proverbs is so much more. This isn't just an ancient text full of life hacks or moral guidelines. The Book of Proverbs is a divinely inspired manual for living a life rooted in truth, honor, and humility. It's not meant to sit on a shelf collecting dust. Proverbs is alive, calling us to understand life in a way that is deeper, truer, and more connected to God's heart. Let's go back to the beginning. Tradition holds that much of Proverbs was written by King Solomon, a man known for his God-given wisdom. Solomon didn't ask for wealth, fame, or power. He asked God for wisdom to lead and understand his people. And because Solomon's request pleased God, he was granted a wisdom unmatched by any other. Proverbs, then, is a glimpse into that wisdom, a collection of insights from a man gifted with divine understanding. But Proverbs isn't just about Solomon. It's about the Spirit of God moving through these words, offering insight and guidance that speak directly to our souls. Each proverb is a condensed lesson, a single line that can pierce through to the heart. They're like seeds, small but packed with the potential to transform us from the inside out if we let them take root. Imagine a book that isn't limited to time or culture. A book that was relevant thousands of years ago and is still uncannily relevant today. Proverbs tackles the issues that never change. How to live with integrity, how to choose friends wisely, how to guard our hearts, how to handle money, relationships, anger, pride, and so much more. It covers everything we struggle with, but it goes beyond simple solutions. Proverbs shows us how to walk in God's ways, to live with divine perspective, and to navigate life with His wisdom guiding us. At its core, Proverbs is an invitation to wisdom, but it's not just any wisdom. It's the wisdom that begins with the fear of the Lord. This book is here to guide us not only in what we do, but in who we are becoming. It's like a mirror, reflecting our actions, our motives, and our desires back to us, challenging us to live lives that are in alignment with God's character. So, as we dive into the teachings of Proverbs, remember, this isn't just a book of advice. It's a blueprint for a life that's rooted in eternal truths, meant to grow us into people who reflect the goodness, strength, and love of our Creator. What does it mean to be wise? To walk through life with understanding, purpose, and clarity. Proverbs tells us that all true wisdom begins with something that sounds unusual: the fear of the Lord. Proverbs 1:7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." But what does this fear really mean? And why is it so essential? To understand the weight of this phrase, we need to consider the life of the man who wrote it, King Solomon. Solomon wasn't just any ruler. He was the son of David, chosen by God to lead Israel, but he didn't start his reign by amassing power or wealth. Instead, Solomon asked for something that pleased God deeply. He asked for wisdom, so he could lead his people well. In 1 Kings 3:9, Solomon prays, "Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong." And God granted Solomon wisdom, unlike anyone before or after him. Solomon was given divine insight that went beyond human understanding. His wisdom became famous, drawing leaders from nations far and wide to seek his counsel. And yet, with all his knowledge, Solomon's writings continually emphasize that true wisdom begins not with intelligence or experience, but with a reverent fear of the Lord. This fear isn't terror. It's an awe that overwhelms the soul. It's the awareness that we stand before a holy, all-powerful Creator who knows the depths of the universe, who sees every hidden motive, and who governs with perfect justice. To fear the Lord is to understand that God is infinitely greater than we can comprehend, and yet, incredibly, He invites us to draw near to Him. The book of Ecclesiastes, another of Solomon's writings, reveals the inner struggles Solomon faced even as he pursued wisdom. Ecclesiastes shows a man who sought pleasure, success, and knowledge, only to conclude that without God, it was all meaningless. Solomon declares in Ecclesiastes 12:13, "Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." He had learned firsthand that wisdom apart from God's truth led to emptiness. But why is this fear of the Lord the foundation of wisdom? Because it sets everything in its rightful place. The fear of the Lord is a recognition that we are not the center of the universe. God is. It's a humbling realization that all human knowledge is limited, that our understanding is a shadow compared to God's light. This fear, this reverence, makes us teachable, ready to receive truth that transcends our limited perspective. In the book of Sirach, a banned book from the traditional canon, but treasured in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, we find a similar insight. The beginning of wisdom is to fear the Lord. She is created with the faithful in the womb. Sirach 1:14. Sirach reveals that this wisdom, born from the fear of the Lord, is woven into the hearts of those who seek God earnestly. It is not learned through human efforts, but gifted by God to those who approach Him with reverence. Imagine for a moment standing before the throne of God, seeing His glory that no human eye can bear, sensing His power, His purity, His holiness. This is the kind of awe that Proverbs calls us to have. It's a fear that brings us to our knees, that makes us aware of our own limitations and our desperate need for God's guidance. For Solomon, this wasn't just a theory. His life illustrates the rise and fall of wisdom. In his early years, Solomon followed God closely, seeking divine wisdom above all else. But later, Solomon's heart grew divided as he pursued wealth, foreign alliances, and even idolatry. The very man who wrote, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom," would stray from that foundation, led astray by pride and distraction. The book of Ecclesiastes captures his later reflections. A man who had it all, but realized he had lost his way without God's wisdom anchoring his life. This is why Proverbs starts with the fear of the Lord. It's a warning, a call to remain grounded, to remember that all wisdom, all knowledge, all understanding begins and ends with God. Without the fear of the Lord, even the wisest can lose their way. In today's world, we're taught to believe that wisdom comes from within, that the answers are found in self-discovery, or the latest trend, or a successful career. But Proverbs challenges us to start with humility, to admit that we are not the source of wisdom. God is. Only when we acknowledge His authority, His holiness, His sovereignty, do we open ourselves to receive true wisdom. In Proverbs, relationships are never treated as casual or unimportant. Every person we let into our lives, every influence we allow, is like a thread in the fabric of our spiritual journey. These people shape our character, our values, and even our faith. Proverbs speaks to this with an urgency, making it clear that the people we choose to walk with can lead us either toward life or toward destruction. Let's look at Proverbs 13:20, which says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." Picture Solomon surrounded by advisors, military leaders, servants, and foreign envoys. As king, he knew the power of influence more than most. He had to discern which people strengthened his reign and which would bring him harm. In those early years, he sought out wise counsel, surrounding himself with people who reinforced his desire to honor God. But over time, Solomon's relationships would change. In his later years, Solomon drifted. He surrounded himself with people who led him to compromise his faith. His numerous alliances, political marriages, and advisors from foreign lands brought influences that lured his heart away from God. This very man, who once valued wisdom above all else, who began with a pure desire to follow God, gradually allowed his relationships to steer him in a direction that ultimately led to spiritual decay. Solomon's life is a profound lesson. Wisdom in relationships isn't a one-time choice. It's an ongoing commitment. And Proverbs, written from the depths of Solomon's experience, warns us of this truth. Imagine yourself in Solomon's shoes, facing the allure of relationships that promise power, status, or satisfaction. Proverbs doesn't just ask us to avoid the influence of fools. It challenges us to see relationships as sacred. Who we walk with isn't about mere proximity. It's about choosing people who will encourage us to grow, who push us toward truth, and who will walk with us through life's challenges while helping us remain grounded in faith. Proverbs 22:24-25 goes even further, cautioning, "Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared." This isn't just practical advice. It's a reminder that emotional and spiritual states are contagious. Proverbs warns that even a subtle influence can shape who we become. The anger, pride, or recklessness of those around us can slowly seep into our own hearts if we aren't careful. The Book of Sirach, another ancient wisdom text not found in the traditional canon, but preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, echoes this sentiment with urgency. "Faithful friends are a sturdy shelter. Whoever finds one has found a treasure." Sirach 6:14. Proverbs and Sirach both emphasize that the right friends are a shelter in a storm, a source of wisdom and comfort that strengthens us against the temptations and struggles we face. Sirach reminds us that friends aren't just companions. They're our shelter, a place of spiritual refuge in a chaotic world. The people we choose to let into our inner circle influence our thoughts, our habits, and even our future. We live in a world where relationships are often treated as disposable, where people come and go, and where the meaning of friendship has often been reduced to a connection on social media. Proverbs calls us to something deeper. It tells us to seek out relationships with intention, to prioritize friendships that lift us up, and to be mindful of those who bring us down. Have you ever found yourself becoming more critical, more anxious, or more restless after spending time with certain people? Proverbs calls us to guard against this, to be vigilant about the people we let close, because their influence has a profound impact on the direction of our lives. Proverbs 27:17 famously states, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Think about what this means. To sharpen iron, friction is required. Sparks fly as two blades come into contact. A true friend, someone worth keeping close, isn't necessarily someone who always agrees with us. A godly friend is someone willing to challenge us, to call out our blind spots, to tell us the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Real friendships, the kind Proverbs speaks of, aren't about flattery or convenience. They're about refining each other for God's purposes. Picture a scene from Solomon's own life. Imagine him as a young king, receiving advice from trusted friends who encouraged him to follow God, to seek wisdom, to remain humble. Those relationships early on would have been sources of strength, shaping his decisions and grounding him in truth. But imagine later, as he grew more isolated, surrounded by those who valued political gain over spiritual integrity. He lost his way, and Proverbs reflects the regret of a man who knew the cost of walking with the wrong people. Who are you walking with? Who is sharpening you, challenging you, encouraging you to be the person God is calling you to be? Are there people in your life who may be leading you off course, who distract you from God's truth, or bring out qualities that don't honor Him? Proverbs urges us to take these questions seriously, to look at our relationships with spiritual clarity and make decisions based on God's wisdom rather than convenience or comfort. Building relationships with the wise doesn't just happen. It takes effort, discernment, and sometimes the courage to let go of people who don't have our best interests at heart. Proverbs reminds us that friendship is more than a social connection. It's a profound spiritual partnership. When we surround ourselves with people who are committed to God's truth, we're better able to withstand life's storms, to grow in wisdom, and to live out the purpose God has placed on our lives. In Proverbs, the power of words is presented with a weight unlike anything we might expect from a simple collection of sayings. It's clear that in God's eyes, words are not trivial or inconsequential. They are powerful, like seeds that can grow into life or spread destruction. Proverbs 18:21 tells us, "The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit." Solomon, the king known for his wisdom, understood that words could build up a kingdom or tear it down. In his role as a leader, a single decree could bring peace, while a careless word could spark war. His own life bore witness to this truth, as his words brought justice and wisdom in his early years, but became mixed with compromise and carelessness later on. This truth in Proverbs isn't just for leaders, it's for every one of us. Every word we speak has the power to heal, to encourage, to bring joy, or to wound, to deceive and to destroy. Think of a time in your own life when words deeply impacted you. Maybe it was an encouraging word that lifted your spirit, or a harsh remark that left a scar. Proverbs doesn't hold back in showing us that words are never just words. They can create ripples that spread through our own lives and the lives of others, reaching far beyond the moment they're spoken. Proverbs 12:18 says, "The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." Imagine a sword, a weapon designed to wound, to harm. Proverbs compares reckless words to that weapon, highlighting how easily we can hurt others without even realizing it. Solomon, through his own journey, likely saw how his words impacted the lives of his people, his family, and his kingdom. What's powerful here is the contrast Proverbs gives us. The reckless words that pierce like swords versus the wise words that bring healing. Words, when spoken with wisdom, have the ability to mend what's broken, to soothe the wounds left by the harshness of life. We all know the feeling of being uplifted by an encouraging word, the way a kind comment can turn a bad day around or give us hope when we're struggling. Proverbs reminds us that each of us has this power within us, to either heal or hurt, to build up or tear down. Proverbs doesn't shy away from the potential harm of words. Proverbs 15:1 offers this insight. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Solomon understood that our responses have a profound influence on the outcome of a situation. Think of how many conflicts, arguments, or misunderstandings could be diffused with a simple, gentle response. The Proverbs invite us to approach our conversations with humility, to seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Words, however, don't only impact those around us, they shape our own hearts. The book of James in the New Testament picks up on this theme in a way that echoes Proverbs, likening the tongue to the rudder of a ship. James 3:4-5 says, "Take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts." Like a rudder, our words can steer the direction of our hearts, guiding us either toward God's truth or away from it. Imagine standing before Solomon asking him, "What is the secret to living in peace?" His answer wouldn't likely be about power or wealth. He would say, "Guard your tongue." For Solomon, the true test of wisdom was often revealed in the way a person spoke, in the gentleness, honesty, and restraint of their words. For him, wisdom wasn't just about what he knew, but how he chose to speak. Here's where Proverbs takes it a step further. Proverbs 16:24 says, "Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones." In ancient Israel, honey wasn't just a treat, it was a precious resource, a gift of sweetness in a land where sugar was rare. Honey was both a delight and a healing balm. Proverbs compares wise words to honeycomb, reminding us that words can be both sweet and restorative, bringing healing to the deepest parts of our being. How often do we consider our words as something that could bring healing? Our world often encourages us to speak without restraint, to say what's on our mind without considering the impact. But Proverbs offers a different way. It challenges us to treat each word with intention, to see our speech as a tool for God's purposes. Are you speaking words that bring life, or do your words often drift toward criticism, anger, or impatience? Proverbs doesn't ask us to be perfect, but it does call us to a higher standard, urging us to make our words a reflection of God's wisdom, love, and patience. Imagine if we approached every conversation with the awareness that our words have the power to build up or break down, how different would our relationships be? Our communities, our own hearts. Proverbs invites us to see the gift God has given us in our ability to speak, to use it for good, and to let our words be channels of His love. In the book of Proverbs, work and wealth aren't treated as mere means to an end. Instead, they're seen as opportunities to reflect God's character, to show faithfulness in the smallest details, and to honor Him in how we handle both our efforts and our resources. Proverbs 10:4 states, "Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth." This isn't just advice about making a living. It's a call to approach our work with intention, viewing our efforts as part of a bigger picture, a picture that includes our relationship with God and our witness to the world around us. King Solomon, as a ruler with access to unimaginable wealth, understood the delicate balance between prosperity and responsibility. He knew that riches could bless a kingdom when used wisely or bring ruin if sought selfishly. In Proverbs, Solomon's teachings reflect this tension, warning against laziness and greed while promoting diligence and contentment. One vivid illustration Solomon uses to teach about diligence comes from Proverbs 6:6-8. "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." Imagine that, Solomon, one of the wealthiest men in history, pointing to a tiny ant to demonstrate a powerful principle of wisdom. The ant, though small, embodies the virtues of self-discipline, preparation, and foresight. It doesn't work only when watched, nor does it labor for immediate gratification. Instead, the ant diligently stores and gathers, working toward a future need with steady, quiet effort. Proverbs challenges us to consider our own approach to work and finances in the same way. Do we work only for short-term gains, for what will satisfy our desires now, or are we like the ant, diligent and disciplined, working with integrity even when no one is watching? Solomon understood that work done faithfully, no matter how mundane, reflects a heart that honors God. In Proverbs 22:7, Solomon issues a sober warning. "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." This verse is more than a caution against debt. It's a reminder that money can become a trap if not handled with care. Proverbs doesn't condemn wealth itself, but warns that without wisdom, it can easily lead to bondage. A life built on borrowing and spending beyond one's means can quickly spiral into a form of enslavement, a dependency on the lender rather than on God. In today's culture, debt is often marketed as a way to achieve dreams instantly. A new car, a bigger home, a luxurious vacation, all just a loan away. But Proverbs urges us to view wealth differently. Financial freedom, according to Proverbs, isn't about having everything we want. It's about living within our means, about letting our needs drive our spending rather than our desires. It's about experiencing the peace that comes from being free from the chains of debt, knowing we can be generous without worry. The book of Sirach, also known as Ecclesiasticus, another ancient wisdom text respected in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, mirrors this teaching with a similar warning. Sirach 31:1 says, "Wakefulness over wealth wastes away one's flesh, and anxiety about it drives away sleep." Sirach reinforces Proverbs' message. Chasing wealth without wisdom can drain us, consuming our peace and even our health. Both Proverbs and Sirach emphasize that true prosperity isn't found in endless accumulation, but in contentment, generosity, and a heart free from the bondage of materialism. Proverbs 11:24-25 offers yet another layer to this wisdom, revealing the paradox of generosity. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. This may seem counterintuitive in a world that encourages us to hold tightly to what we have, but Proverbs presents giving as a divine principle. Those who give generously are themselves enriched, not necessarily in material wealth, but in joy, peace, and spiritual blessings that far surpass the value of money. Imagine living this way, not clinging to every dollar, but trusting God's provision, being free to give without hesitation, knowing that God's abundance flows through those who are willing to share. This is the wisdom that Proverbs invites us into, a life of freedom, contentment, and faith. And when it comes to hard work, Proverbs 12:11 reinforces the virtue of honest labor. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. Solomon understood the lure of get-rich-quick schemes, the idea that shortcuts could lead to instant wealth. But Proverbs warns that integrity in work and consistency in effort yield true, lasting reward. Honest labor, whether in our careers, our homes, or our ministries, bears fruit over time, while shortcuts often lead to disappointment or even ruin. Are you working and managing your finances in a way that honors God's wisdom? Are you diligent in your efforts, mindful of debt, and open-handed in generosity? Proverbs calls us to evaluate our work and resources not as things we own, but as gifts entrusted to us by God. How we handle these gifts reveals our hearts. Imagine starting each day with the intention to work for God, to handle money with His wisdom, to see each task and each paycheck as part of a larger divine purpose. Proverbs doesn't just want us to work and earn, it wants us to live with purpose, diligence, and peace in every area of our lives. If these teachings resonate with you, take a moment to reflect on how you might align your work and finances with God's principles. And if you know someone who might benefit from this wisdom, share this video with them. Here on Deep Bible Stories, we're on a journey to uncover truths that not only impact our spiritual lives, but shape how we live, work, and give. In Proverbs, integrity isn't just a virtue, it's the bedrock of a life that truly honors God. Proverbs teaches that integrity isn't about perfection, but about consistency, honesty, and alignment with God's ways. It's the commitment to do what's right, not just when it's easy or when others are watching, but in every circumstance. Proverbs 10:9 says, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out." Imagine the life of Solomon, a king who was entrusted with both power and wisdom. He knew the temptations that came with wealth and influence, the allure of shortcuts, the appeal of bending truth to gain favor or avoid conflict. Early in his reign, Solomon was celebrated for his wisdom and discernment. He asked God for understanding, not riches or power, and God blessed him abundantly. Yet as time passed, Solomon's integrity would be tested. He would learn, as we all do, that integrity isn't a one-time choice, but a continual commitment, a daily decision to live by the principles that align us with God's truth. Integrity, in the eyes of Proverbs, is more than honesty or moral uprightness. It's about being whole, undivided. To walk in integrity is to live in alignment with God's character, with no hidden agendas, no double-mindedness. It's the quiet strength of knowing that our actions, words, and thoughts are all guided by a commitment to truth, justice, and compassion. Proverbs 11:3 adds to this by saying, "The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity." In a world where deception, manipulation, and moral compromises are often rewarded, Proverbs calls us to a higher standard. It tells us that integrity acts like a compass, guiding us through the challenges, the temptations, and the uncertainties of life. When we walk in integrity, we're not swayed by the latest trend or temptation. Instead, we're grounded, our path is clear, and our conscience is at peace. The book of Sirach offers a similar perspective, emphasizing the value of integrity and the blessings of a righteous heart. Sirach 4:10 warns, "Do not let your integrity or loyalty be compromised, even if it seems to bring suffering." Like Proverbs, Sirach reminds us that integrity sometimes comes at a cost. Standing firm in truth might not always bring immediate rewards. In fact, it might bring criticism, misunderstanding, or even hardship. But Proverbs assures us that this cost is worth it. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely. There's a security, a peace that comes from knowing we are in alignment with God, that our lives are a reflection of His character, even when the world doesn't understand or agree. Imagine yourself in a difficult situation where the truth is hard to tell, where honesty could cost you something precious, a relationship, a job opportunity, or the approval of those you respect. Proverbs speaks to that moment, urging us to choose the path of integrity over convenience, to trust that God honors those who honor Him, even when it seems costly. Proverbs 27 says, "The righteous who walks in his integrity, blessed are his children after him." This verse touches on something profound, the legacy of integrity. Integrity doesn't just affect our lives, it shapes the lives of those who come after us. Children, friends, family members, all are impacted by the example we set. When we walk in integrity, we're creating a legacy that blesses others, a path they can follow with confidence. Imagine the blessing of passing down not just material wealth, but a legacy of character, a reputation for honesty, a name associated with kindness and faithfulness. Proverbs also makes it clear that integrity isn't just a safeguard for ourselves. It's a light that shines in the darkness of a broken world. Proverbs 4:18 beautifully captures this. "The path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day." When we live with integrity, our lives are a beacon of hope, a testimony that it is possible to walk uprightly in a world filled with corruption and deceit. People around us see this light, they're drawn to it, inspired by it, and sometimes even changed by it. In today's culture, integrity can feel like a lonely road. We're often pressured to bend the truth, to take shortcuts, to follow the crowd, even when it goes against our convictions. But Proverbs calls us to something greater. It promises that those who walk in integrity walk with a confidence that no worldly approval can offer. They walk with the assurance that their steps are ordered by God, that He sees their faithfulness, and that He rewards those who honor His truth. Let's think for a moment about what it would look like to live with this kind of integrity in every area of our lives. Imagine relationships built on honesty, workplaces where people respect one another's word, communities that value truth over convenience. Integrity is more than a personal virtue. It's a transformative force, one that has the power to reshape our families, our communities, and even our world. Proverbs 28:6 reinforces this by saying, "Better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than a rich man who is crooked in his ways." This verse speaks directly to a timeless temptation, the desire to compromise for the sake of gain, to sacrifice character in pursuit of wealth, success, or status. Proverbs teaches us that true wealth isn't measured by our bank accounts or social status, but by the depth of our character. A life lived in integrity is one of the greatest treasures we can possess, and it's a treasure that doesn't fade or lose its value. Are you walking in integrity? Are there areas in your life where compromise has crept in, where convenience has taken the place of conviction? Proverbs challenges us to examine our hearts, to align every part of our lives with God's truth, and to let His wisdom guide each step. The book of Proverbs often points to a paradox that feels almost countercultural. True greatness is found in humility. Over and over, Proverbs warns that while the world exalts pride and self-confidence, it is humility that brings us closer to God. Proverbs 16:18 famously states, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." This isn't just a moral lesson, it's a spiritual law woven into the fabric of life, warning us that pride isn't just a character flaw, it's a force that leads to downfall. King Solomon, despite all his wisdom, was not immune to the dangers of pride. He began his reign with a humble request for wisdom, seeking God's guidance above all else. But as his fame, wealth, and power grew, Solomon's humility began to erode. His story serves as a powerful reminder that pride often starts small, creeping into our hearts almost unnoticed. It can take the form of self-reliance, the desire to be seen as superior, or the subtle belief that we are above the rules. Imagine Solomon's life. He built a glorious kingdom, amassed wealth that would make him the richest man of his time, and ruled with authority that was unmatched. Yet, his heart gradually shifted. The very king who once declared the fear of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom would later make decisions that led to his kingdom's fragmentation. Solomon's life illustrates that pride is not only dangerous, but deceptive. It can thrive under the surface, wrapped in success, achievement, and even good intentions, until it eventually leads us away from God. Proverbs 11:2 adds, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." To the world, pride can appear strong, confident, even admirable. But in God's eyes, pride is dangerous because it blinds us to our need for Him. Pride creates a barrier between us and the wisdom God offers. Proverbs tells us that humility, on the other hand, opens the door to true understanding. To be humble is to recognize that we don't have all the answers, that our strength is limited, and that our lives are secure only in God's hands. Humility is the foundation of wisdom because it keeps us teachable. Proverbs 3:34 echoes this truth, saying, "He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and oppressed." The humble are those who remain open to correction, who are willing to learn, and who acknowledge their dependency on God. This is why Proverbs speaks so highly of humility. It brings us into alignment with God's heart, allowing us to see ourselves and the world as He does. In the book of Sirach, humility is praised in a similar way. Sirach 3:18 advises, "The greater you are, the more you must humble yourself, so you will find favor in the sight of the Lord." Sirach, like Proverbs, highlights the irony of humility. The more we achieve, the more we need to remember our dependence on God. This goes against what the world teaches us. We're often told to celebrate our strengths, to stand out, to prove ourselves. But Proverbs and Sirach call us to a different standard, one where we take less pride in our accomplishments and more joy in serving others. Proverbs 29:23 warns us again, saying, "Pride brings a person low, but the lowly in spirit gain honor." This verse challenges us to question where we place our sense of worth. Pride builds itself on the things that the world values: power, status, and appearance. But humility finds worth in God's love and in the quiet strength that comes from walking in obedience to Him. Proverbs teaches that those who are lowly in spirit will be lifted up by God. It's a principle that invites us to let go of the need for recognition and instead trust that God sees, knows, and honors those who seek him with a humble heart. Consider the life of Jesus, who demonstrated the ultimate humility. In the New Testament, we see the fulfillment of Proverbs' teachings on humility in Christ. Philippians 2:6-8 says of Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Jesus, though he had every right to claim power, chose the path of humility, giving up his life for the sake of others. His life reflects the ultimate victory of humility over pride, and shows us that true greatness is found in servanthood, not status. But Proverbs also warns us of the subtlety of pride. Proverbs 26:12 cautions, do you see a person wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for them. This verse challenges us to examine our own hearts. Pride often disguises itself as self-confidence, as independence, as knowing better. It can be as simple as dismissing someone else's advice or resisting correction. Proverbs reminds us that the one who is wise in their own eyes shuts themselves off from God's wisdom. It's a dangerous place to be because pride blinds us to our own need for growth. Are there areas in your life where pride has crept in? Are you leaning on your own understanding rather than seeking God's wisdom? Proverbs invites us to lay down our self-sufficiency, to admit our need for God, and to walk humbly with him. When we let go of pride, we're able to experience the fullness of his guidance, his protection, and his love. Imagine what it would look like to live this way, free from the need to prove yourself, willing to take correction, open to learning from others. Humility isn't about thinking less of ourselves, it's about thinking of ourselves less. It's about recognizing that our lives are not our own, that every gift, every talent, and every opportunity is from God, meant to glorify him and serve others. In the book of Proverbs, one of the most profound themes is the call to trust God fully and abandon self-reliance. In a world where independence and self-sufficiency are celebrated, Proverbs turns this idea on its head, declaring that the path to true peace, guidance, and security isn't found in relying on ourselves, but in surrendering to God. Proverbs 3:5-6 captures this beautifully. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Imagine the weight of those words. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. This isn't a partial trust or something to lean on only in hard times. It's a call to place every fear, every hope, and every decision in God's hands, to trust him with every fiber of our being. Solomon, with all his wisdom and understanding, knew the limitations of human knowledge. Despite his unparalleled insights, he saw that even the wisest person falls short of understanding the fullness of God's plan. This is why he implores us to trust not in ourselves, but in God, whose wisdom surpasses all. Self-reliance is an enticing path. It offers control, a sense of security, and the promise that we can determine our own destiny. But Proverbs warns that leaning on our own understanding ultimately leads us into troubled waters. Proverbs 28:26 declares, "Those who trust in themselves are fools, but those who walk in wisdom are kept safe." This isn't an insult. It's a stark reminder that our knowledge, as vast as it may seem, is limited. We can't see the full picture or anticipate the consequences of every decision. To rely solely on ourselves is to build our lives on a foundation that cannot withstand life's storms. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a dense forest, trying to find your way through without a map. You might navigate some parts on your own, but eventually you'll reach places where your own sense of direction isn't enough. Proverbs tells us that God is that map, that guide who knows every twist and turn ahead. When we acknowledge Him surrendering our plans and our paths, He directs us, not just randomly, but with purpose and precision. Proverbs 16:9 says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." This verse captures the mystery and beauty of God's guidance. We can make plans, set goals, and work toward them, but it is ultimately God who shapes our journey. Solomon reminds us that while we can dream and plan, there is a divine wisdom that surpasses our own, leading us even when we cannot see the way. But trusting God isn't passive. It requires an active surrender, a choice to lay down our pride and open our hearts to His direction. Proverbs 19:21 echoes this with remarkable clarity. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. This isn't just about letting go of control. It's about embracing God's purpose over our own desires. We might have dreams or ideas that seem right to us, but God's wisdom sees beyond the present moment. He guides us not just toward what we want, but toward what will truly fulfill and transform us. The book of Job, another wisdom text, offers a perspective that resonates with Proverbs' call to trust. In Job 12:13 it says, "To God belong wisdom and power, counsel and understanding are His." Job's story is one of intense suffering and loss, yet throughout his journey, he learns to surrender his understanding and place his trust in God's ultimate wisdom. Like Proverbs, Job reveals that trusting God doesn't mean understanding every detail. It means believing that God's wisdom and power are sufficient to carry us through every trial. When we surrender to God, Proverbs tells us we experience a peace that self-reliance can never offer. Proverbs 3:24 says, "When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet." This verse isn't just about physical rest. It's about a deep inner peace, a freedom from the anxieties that come from trying to control everything ourselves. Trusting God brings rest to our souls, a sweet peace that soothes even in life's uncertainties. Are you truly trusting God with all your heart, or are there areas where you're leaning on your own understanding? Proverbs invites us to examine our lives and to bring every decision, every plan under God's wisdom. It's a call to abandon the illusion of control and to embrace a life guided by faith rather than fear. Imagine the freedom that comes from trusting God completely. Think of how many of life's worries would fade if we truly believe that God is directing our steps, that His plans are better than ours, and that He knows what we need even more than we do. Proverbs promises that when we place our trust in Him, He makes our path straight. This doesn't mean our lives will be without challenges, but it means that every challenge, every trial, has purpose and direction. Proverbs 3:7-8 offers a final encouragement on this path of trust. "Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones." Trusting God isn't just a spiritual act, it impacts every part of our lives. When we release the burdens of self-reliance, we experience a lightness, a renewal that strengthens us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. It's a healing that flows from knowing we are in the hands of a God who loves us deeply and who works all things together for our good. The book of Proverbs doesn't shy away from the complexities of human emotion. Anger, in particular, is addressed repeatedly as both a powerful force and a potential stumbling block on the path to wisdom. Proverbs 16:32 says, "Better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city." Imagine that, Solomon, the great king, valued a person who could control their anger and emotions over a mighty warrior. Why? Because conquering one's own heart is far more difficult and, in the eyes of God, far more honorable than conquering anything in the external world. Anger is a natural human response, often sparked by frustration, betrayal, or injustice. But Proverbs reminds us that left unchecked, anger can lead to impulsive actions, harsh words, and broken relationships. Proverbs 29:11 warns, "Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end." This verse shows the distinction between wisdom and folly. A wise person doesn't let anger control them. They control it. While the world may see venting anger as a show of strength or a way to assert one's dominance, Proverbs sees it as foolishness, a sign that one is ruled by emotion rather than by wisdom. Consider Solomon's perspective as a leader who would have dealt with conflicts, betrayals, and challenges constantly. He knew the cost of letting anger take control. For a king, anger could lead to impulsive decisions that might harm not only individuals, but entire nations. For us, anger might not impact a kingdom, but it has the power to affect our families, our friendships, and our own spiritual health. Proverbs urges us to be careful with this powerful emotion, to recognize it for what it is, and to respond to it with self-control and wisdom. But self-control is not something we master overnight. It requires intentionality, humility, and dependence on God. Proverbs 19:11 says, "A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense." This verse challenges us to see beyond our immediate reaction, to look deeper and find patience in moments that might otherwise provoke us. Proverbs teaches that our ability to control our temper is not a weakness, but a strength, an honor that comes from understanding the power of grace. Self-control, as Proverbs describes it, is a reflection of God's own character. Think of how many times throughout the Bible God displays patience with humanity, showing mercy where judgment was deserved. Just as God is slow to anger and rich in mercy, He calls us to reflect this patience in our relationships. Proverbs teaches that when we practice self-control, we're not just managing an emotion, we're participating in God's nature, choosing love over wrath, understanding over reaction. Yet Proverbs is clear that anger isn't inherently wrong. Proverbs 14:29 offers this insight. "Whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly." The issue isn't anger itself, but how we handle it. Righteous anger, a deep indignation toward injustice, cruelty, or oppression, can reflect God's heart. But even righteous anger requires self-control. We are called to respond thoughtfully, channeling our energy toward positive action rather than letting anger fester or lead us into sin. The book of Sirach speaks similarly about self-control, calling it the key to a peaceful and wise life. Sirach 28:2-3 warns, "Forgive your neighbor the wrong he has done, and then your sins will be pardoned when you pray. Does a man harbor anger against another and yet seek for healing from the Lord?" Sirach, like Proverbs, challenges us to let go of anger, especially when it hinders our relationship with God. In both texts, there's a clear message. Forgiveness and self-control aren't just good practices, they're essential to a life of wisdom and peace. In today's world, the idea of self-control over anger feels almost countercultural. We live in an age where speaking your mind and getting even are often praised, where anger is sometimes seen as a badge of honor, a way to assert oneself. But Proverbs tells us that real strength isn't in unleashing our anger, but in holding it back. Proverbs 15:18 advises, "A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel." This isn't just practical advice. It's a spiritual principle. Choosing patience over anger not only preserves peace, it reflects the heart of God. Imagine the freedom that would come from mastering this principle. How many arguments could be avoided? How many relationships could be healed? Proverbs teaches that in moments of anger, we have a choice to escalate or to calm, to react or to respond. Every time we choose self-control, we bring a little more of God's peace into our own hearts and into the lives of those around us. How do you respond to anger? Do you allow it to take control, or do you seek God's help in responding with patience? Proverbs invites us to examine our hearts, to recognize where anger has taken root, and to bring it under God's guidance. Anger doesn't have to lead to destruction. It can lead us closer to God if we're willing to surrender it to Him. One of the most powerful verses on self-control comes from Proverbs 25:28. Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. In ancient times, a city without walls was vulnerable, exposed to attacks, and unable to defend itself. Proverbs uses this image to show that a lack of self-control leaves us equally defenseless. Without self-control, our emotions, especially anger, can lead us into actions and words we later regret, leaving us spiritually exposed and vulnerable. Proverbs encourages us to build up the walls of self-control around our hearts, to be vigilant and intentional, protecting our spirit from the destruction that unchecked anger can bring. When we exercise self-control, we're not denying our emotions. We're directing them, using them in ways that align with God's purpose. Imagine how different life could look if we embraced Proverbs' wisdom on anger and self-control. Picture a world where patience and understanding are stronger than retaliation, where grace is extended before judgment, and where people seek God's peace rather than venting every frustration. This is the life Proverbs calls us to, a life where we reflect God's character in every reaction, every conversation, and every relationship. In the book of Proverbs, discipline isn't viewed as punishment or mere restriction. It's a pathway to growth, wisdom, and ultimately to a life that honors God. Discipline is described as a treasure that shapes our character, sharpens our focus, and refines our hearts. Proverbs 12:1 sets the tone by stating, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid." This is a stark reminder that wisdom and discipline go hand in hand. In God's eyes, discipline isn't harsh or limiting. It's a gift, a way of aligning our lives with His purpose. Solomon, with all his insight, knew that a life without discipline is a life that drifts. Proverbs 25:28 says, "Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control." Imagine a city with no walls, exposed to every threat, every danger. Proverbs uses this powerful image to convey that without discipline, we leave ourselves vulnerable, not just to external challenges, but to the impulses, desires, and distractions that can pull us away from God's path. Discipline, like walls around a city, protects us, giving structure and security to our lives. Proverbs teaches that discipline isn't just for times of correction, it's a lifestyle, a commitment to live purposefully. Proverbs 6:6-8 offers us the example of the ant. "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." This isn't just about hard work. It's about self-motivation, the ability to act with foresight and diligence without constant supervision. Proverbs encourages us to adopt the ant's disciplined way of life, to prepare, to persevere, and to keep moving forward even when no one is watching. At its core, Proverbs teaches that discipline is an act of humility. It's the willingness to be corrected, to learn from our mistakes, and to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. Proverbs 3:11-12 says, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father the son he delights in." Discipline, in this sense, is not only valuable, but a sign of God's love. When God corrects us, he's not punishing us. He's guiding us, helping us avoid paths that lead to destruction and nudging us back toward life. This concept of loving correction and discipline can feel foreign in a world that values independence and freedom from accountability. But Proverbs challenges this view, showing us that discipline isn't about control, it's about freedom. Proverbs 13:18 warns, "Whoever disregards discipline comes to poverty and shame, but whoever heeds correction is honored." In God's kingdom, discipline is the key to honor and prosperity, a way of building a life that withstands both challenges and temptations. The person who embraces discipline isn't restricted. They're empowered to live with intention, focus, and resilience. The book of Sirach also speaks to the value of discipline, particularly in character development. Sirach 18:14-15 says, "God's mercy is shown to those who accept discipline and who are eager to obey his judgments." Just like Proverbs, Sirach emphasizes that God's correction is a gift. Accepting discipline is a way of embracing God's mercy, acknowledging that he knows what's best for us, even when it's uncomfortable or challenging. Proverbs also reminds us that discipline isn't just about what we avoid, but what we pursue. Proverbs 10:17 says, "Whoever heeds discipline shows the way to life, but whoever ignores correction leads others astray." When we live disciplined lives, we're setting an example, a light for others to follow. Think about the impact of a disciplined life in your family, workplace, or community. Discipline isn't just personal, it's communal. By embracing it, we're creating a ripple effect, inspiring those around us to seek God's wisdom, to value correction, and to pursue integrity. In our culture, discipline is often associated with self-denial or hardship, but Proverbs offers a different perspective. Discipline is a way to joy, a path that leads to rewards. Proverbs 15:32-33 declares, "Those who disregard discipline despise themselves, but the one who heeds correction gains understanding. Wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humility comes before honor." Discipline leads us to wisdom and honor, aligning us with God's purposes and bringing blessings into our lives. It's not about restriction, it's about shaping our lives according to God's design so that we can experience true fulfillment. Imagine a life where every decision is guided by God's wisdom, where every choice reflects his truth. Proverbs teaches that discipline helps us achieve this life, not by controlling every detail, but by giving us the tools to choose wisely. Through discipline, we learn patience, self-control, and resilience, qualities that are invaluable in our walk with God. Discipline allows us to grow spiritually, transforming us from the inside out. How do you view discipline? Is it something you avoid, something you see as a burden, or can you see it as a gift from God, a way to grow closer to him? Proverbs invites us to reframe our understanding of discipline, to see it as a pathway to wisdom, honor, and ultimately to a deeper relationship with our Creator. The book of Proverbs speaks powerfully about the family as a foundational unit, a place where love, wisdom, and character are cultivated and passed down from one generation to the next. Proverbs is filled with advice not only for parents, but for children, urging both to honor each other and to embrace the wisdom of God within their homes. In Proverbs, Parenting is seen as one of the highest callings, a sacred duty to guide and shape young lives according to God's principles. One of the most well-known verses in Proverbs is Proverbs 22:6, which says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it." This isn't just a proverb, it's a promise. Proverbs acknowledges that the foundation we build in our children's lives will shape their paths, influencing the choices they make long after they leave our homes. But what does it mean to train up a child? It's more than just teaching right from wrong. It's about guiding children to know God personally, instilling a deep love and respect for His word, and modeling a life that seeks His wisdom daily. Imagine Solomon, the author of many proverbs, passing down this wisdom to his own children, sharing the insights he learned through both success and failure. He knew that wisdom doesn't come from mere instruction, but from example. Proverbs reminds us that as parents, our lives speak as loudly as our words. Children learn not only from what we say, but from what we do, from the way we handle conflict, treat others, and live out our faith. Proverbs emphasizes that discipline is a vital part of parenting. Proverbs 13:24 tells us, "Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them." In the context of Proverbs, the rod represents guidance and correction, not punishment for punishment's sake. The goal is to lead children away from harmful behaviors and toward righteousness. Discipline in Proverbs is a form of love, a way to teach children the difference between wisdom and folly, right and wrong. It's a tool to help them grow in character and to protect them from paths that lead to destruction. Yet, discipline in Proverbs is always balanced with love and patience. Proverbs 15:1 teaches, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Parenting is a call to embody both firmness and gentleness, to correct with compassion and to teach with patience. Proverbs urges parents to avoid harshness, knowing that anger or criticism can wound a child's spirit. Instead, parents are encouraged to model patience and understanding, to create an environment where children feel secure in both love and guidance. The Book of Sirach offers a similar view, highlighting the responsibility parents have in shaping their children's lives. Sirach 31:2 says, "Whoever loves their son will discipline him often, so that he may rejoice in him in the end." This echoes Proverbs' teaching, emphasizing that discipline is an act of love, not control. Just as Proverbs warns against harshness, Sirach reminds us that true discipline is rooted in love and directed toward a child's future joy and fulfillment. Both texts remind us that parenting is a balance of instruction and encouragement, correction and affirmation. In Proverbs, children are called to honor their parents, recognizing the wisdom and experience they offer. Proverbs 1:8-9 says, "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck." Here, Proverbs speaks to the beauty of a parent's guidance, portraying it as a crown, a blessing, and a source of honor. When children respect and embrace the wisdom of their parents, they carry a legacy of strength and character that blesses them throughout life. But Proverbs also places a great responsibility on parents to be worthy of that honor. Proverbs 14:26 teaches, "Whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress, and for their children it will be a refuge." This verse reveals that a parent's faith becomes a spiritual shelter for their children. When parents walk closely with God, seeking His wisdom and living with integrity, they create a spiritual covering over their family, a place of safety where children feel protected, loved, and valued. Parents are called to be that refuge, that safe place where children can grow up anchored in God's love. In today's fast-paced culture, Proverbs' wisdom on family and parenting is more relevant than ever. We live in a world where values and beliefs are often challenged, where children are exposed to conflicting messages from every direction. Proverbs urges us to create homes that are grounded in God's truth, where His word is the foundation and His wisdom guides every decision. It calls parents to prioritize teaching God's ways, even when the world tells us other things are more important. Let's pause and reflect. Are we creating a home where God's wisdom is cherished and taught? Are we modeling patience, integrity, and love in a way that honors God? Proverbs invites us to see our families as the first place where faith is lived out, a place where God's truth is not only taught, but embodied. Proverbs 27 highlights the impact of this kind of faith. The righteous lead blameless lives, blessed are their children after them. This verse speaks to the power of a life lived in righteousness and how it blesses future generations. When parents choose to live in alignment with God's ways, their children reap the benefits, growing up with a model of integrity, love, and faithfulness. It's a legacy that goes beyond material wealth, creating a spiritual inheritance that shapes their lives for years to come. Imagine what it would look like if every family embraced this wisdom. If homes were places where God's love was taught, where discipline was balanced with compassion, and where children felt valued and protected. Proverbs tells us that this kind of family environment doesn't just benefit the individual household, it impacts communities, generations, and ultimately, the world. In Proverbs, Solomon doesn't shy away from addressing one of the most challenging aspects of human life, sexual purity and the lure of temptation. Proverbs speaks directly to the heart of these issues, urging readers to be vigilant, to exercise self-control, and to remember that our bodies and hearts are sacred, meant to honor God. Proverbs 5:3-5 warns, "For the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil, but in the end she is bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps lead straight to the grave." Imagine Solomon's perspective as he wrote these words. A king surrounded by power, wealth, and temptation, he would have known firsthand the dangers of allowing desire to cloud judgment. In Proverbs, Solomon likens temptation to a path that seems inviting, but ultimately leads to ruin. The sweetness of forbidden attraction is momentary, but its consequences can last a lifetime, leading not only to personal heartache, but to broken relationships, damaged reputations, and even spiritual isolation. Proverbs urges us to look beyond the allure of temptation and see it for what it truly is, a trap that harms not only us, but those we love. Proverbs 6:27-29 uses powerful imagery to convey this. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? So is he who sleeps with another man's wife. No one who touches her will go unpunished. This vivid imagery serves as a reminder that indulging in sexual sin carries consequences, both visible and unseen. Just as fire leaves burns, succumbing to temptation scars the heart and soul. Proverbs doesn't only address the dangers of temptation, it offers practical wisdom for resisting it. Proverbs 4:23 instructs, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." This verse holds a powerful truth. The battle for purity begins in the heart. The mind and soul are gateways to our actions, and Proverbs teaches that by guarding what we allow into our hearts, our thoughts, desires, and intentions, we can avoid falling into the snares of temptation. Proverbs calls us to a vigilant life, one where we actively protect our hearts from influences that lead us away from God's will. Solomon aware of the weakness of human nature, urges his readers to exercise wisdom and discernment in their relationships. Proverbs 7 tells the story of a young man led astray by temptation, following the path of a seductress who promises pleasure but ultimately leads him toward destruction. Proverbs 7:22-23 describes it vividly. All at once he followed her like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. This warning isn't just about physical relationships. It's a cautionary tale about the power of unchecked desire and the need for boundaries. The book of Sirach echoes Proverbs' warnings on temptation and purity. Sirach 9:3-4 advises, "Do not gaze at a virgin, lest you be ensnared by her beauty. Do not give your soul to prostitutes, lest you destroy your inheritance." Both Sirach and Proverbs address the need to guard our senses, to avoid situations that would lead us down a path of compromise. In Sirach, as in Proverbs, wisdom is about setting boundaries, not out of restriction, but out of protection, a way of preserving our integrity and honoring God. In today's culture, the teachings of Proverbs on sexual purity and temptation are more relevant than ever. We live in an age where boundaries are often disregarded, where purity is seen as old-fashioned, and where temptation is present at every turn, from social media to entertainment. Proverbs calls us to live differently, to value purity, and to seek God's wisdom in a world that often glorifies the opposite. But why does Proverbs place such emphasis on purity? Because purity isn't just about refraining from certain actions, it's about honoring God with our whole being. Proverbs 16:2 tells us, "All a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord." God doesn't just see our actions, He sees our intentions, our hidden thoughts, and our deepest desires. Purity is about aligning these inner aspects of ourselves with God's holiness, seeking to honor Him in thought, word, and deed. Imagine the freedom that comes from living a life of integrity and purity, a life unburdened by guilt, unclouded by secrets, and fully dedicated to God. Proverbs 10:9 promises, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out." This verse assures us that a life lived in purity and integrity brings peace and security. It's a life that doesn't have to hide, that doesn't live in fear of being found out, but that rests in the assurance of God's approval. Proverbs 5:18-19 also offers a positive vision of love and commitment, encouraging us to honor and cherish our marriages. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. May you ever be intoxicated with her love. Proverbs teaches that God's design for love and intimacy is beautiful when experienced within the boundaries He has set. Rather than seeing purity as a restriction, Proverbs celebrates it as a way to experience deeper joy, trust, and connection within the bonds of marriage. How are you guarding your heart against temptation? Are you actively seeking God's wisdom in your relationships and decisions, or are there areas where compromise has crept in? Proverbs invites us to examine our hearts, to recognize where we need to set boundaries, and to seek purity as a path to deeper connection with God. In the book of Proverbs, the consequences of sin are painted in stark, unforgettable imagery. Sin isn't merely a mistake or a poor decision. It's a path that leads to darkness, suffering, and ultimately, destruction. Proverbs warns us that when we choose to walk in sin, we're not just making life difficult for ourselves. We're stepping into a dangerous spiritual reality that distances us from God's protection, peace, and guidance. Proverbs 5:22-23 captures this with powerful words. "The evil deeds of the wicked ensnare them, The cords of their sins hold them fast. For lack of discipline they will die, led astray by their own great folly. Here, Proverbs uses the imagery of sin as a snare, a trap that entangles those who fall into it, holding them tightly and leading them to spiritual and even physical ruin. This verse serves as a solemn reminder that sin doesn't just happen to us. Rather, it's a result of choices, often small ones, that pull us further away from God and lead us into bondage. Consider the world we live in today. Society often downplays the seriousness of sin, treating it as a trivial mistake or something that's easy to brush off. But Proverbs teaches us that sin has a lasting impact. Proverbs 10:16 says, "The wages of the righteous bring them life, but the income of the wicked brings them punishment." This verse reflects a spiritual truth that reverberates throughout the Bible. Every action, every decision has consequences. For the righteous, a life lived in alignment with God's will leads to peace and fulfillment. For those who choose sin, the consequences are emptiness, suffering, and judgment. One of the most poignant passages in Proverbs comes from Proverbs 1:29-31, which speaks of those who ignore wisdom. Since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord, they will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. In other words, sin bears fruit, a bitter harvest that we inevitably have to reap. This image reminds us that sin is not without cost. When we choose our own way over God's, we're planting seeds that will grow into a harvest of regret, pain, and loss. Proverbs doesn't just warn about the general effects of sin, it also dives into specific actions and their consequences. Proverbs 6:27-28 speaks directly to those who fall into lust and sexual sin. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? The answer is clear. No one can escape the consequences of sin. Just as fire burns and coals scorch, so sin leaves its mark. This warning isn't meant to shame us, but to open our eyes to the reality that God's commandments are there to protect us, not to restrict us. The book of Sirach also speaks powerfully about sin's consequences, echoing Proverbs' warnings. Sirach 21:2 says, "Flee from sin as from a snake. For if you approach sin, it will bite you. Its teeth are lion's teeth and can destroy human lives." Like Proverbs, Sirach doesn't sugarcoat the truth. Sin has a vicious bite, and approaching it carelessly will lead to destruction. Both texts remind us that sin is not something to be flirted with or taken lightly. It's a force that, when unchecked, seeks to devour and destroy. Yet Proverbs doesn't leave us without hope. It teaches us that while sin has consequences, redemption is always within reach for those who turn to God. Proverbs 28:13 offers a promise of hope and forgiveness. Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. This verse shows that while sin entraps us, confession and repentance free us. God is merciful, willing to forgive those who acknowledge their wrongs and seek His grace. Proverbs urges us to be honest about our sins, to confess and turn away from them, knowing that in God's mercy there is freedom. Imagine the relief and peace that come from confessing, from laying down the weight of hidden sins. Proverbs 14:12 warns, "There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death." This isn't just a warning about moral failure, it's an invitation to examine the paths we're walking. Are we following our own understanding, or are we seeking God's wisdom to guide us? Proverbs teaches that without God's wisdom, we may think we're on the right path, but it leads to spiritual death. Proverbs calls us to a life of integrity, one that resists sin and its consequences by seeking God's truth. Proverbs 16:6 says, "Through love and faithfulness sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord evil is avoided." This verse provides a solution. Living in awe of God and embracing His love shields us from the pull of sin. When we live with reverence for God, honoring Him in all we do, we're empowered to avoid evil and walk in His ways. Are there areas in your life where you've been ignoring the consequences of sin? Are there paths you're walking that may feel right, but you know deep down they're leading you away from God? Proverbs invites us to face these questions honestly, to acknowledge where we may have strayed, and to return to God's mercy. Proverbs reminds us that sin has consequences, but it also teaches us that God's grace is greater than any mistake. Imagine the freedom that comes from walking in alignment with God's wisdom, from choosing the path that leads to life rather than destruction. Proverbs 11:19 promises, "Truly, the righteous attain life, but whoever pursues evil finds death." This isn't just about physical life or death, it's about the state of our souls, our hearts, and our relationship with God. In Proverbs, the consequences of sin are serious and unavoidable, but they are not outside of God's control. God's sovereignty means that nothing, no sin, no mistake, no rebellion, is beyond His reach. Proverbs teaches us that while sin leads to destruction, God is sovereign over all, orchestrating justice and mercy to work together for His ultimate purpose. Proverbs 16:4 affirms this powerfully. "The Lord works out everything to its proper end, even the wicked for a day of disaster." Here we see a profound truth. God's hand is in everything. Even when we stray, when we rebel, He is able to turn it all to fulfill His plan. This verse can feel heavy, even unsettling, but it reveals the depth of God's control and His unwavering commitment to justice. God's sovereignty means that sin will not go unchecked. The consequences of our actions unfold within His design, guiding us back to Him or demonstrating the seriousness of living outside His will. Proverbs assures us that no matter how chaotic or broken life appears, God's justice remains, and His purposes are never thwarted by human failure. In Proverbs 3:33-34, we're reminded that the Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but He blesses the home of the righteous. He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and oppressed. This paints a picture of God's justice and mercy in action. While sin brings a curse upon those who reject God's ways, humility invites His grace and favor. God's sovereignty ensures that sin's consequences aren't arbitrary or meaningless. They serve a purpose, drawing us toward repentance and showing the contrast between a life aligned with God and a life against Him. One of the most striking aspects of Proverbs' approach to God's sovereignty is its focus on the heart. Proverbs 21:1 says, "In the Lord's hand, the king's heart is a stream of water that He channels toward all who please Him." Even the hearts of kings, rulers, and leaders are under God's control. This means that the consequences of sin, whether in our personal lives or at a societal level, are allowed or redirected by God according to His purpose. No sin, no failure, no leader is beyond His influence. God is constantly at work, guiding, correcting, and using every situation, even those resulting from sin, for His glory. Imagine the comfort and reverence that comes from knowing that nothing, not even the consequences of our worst decisions, can derail God's plan. Proverbs 19:21 reminds us, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." This doesn't diminish our responsibility or the impact of sin's consequences, but it reveals God's unshakable sovereignty. Though we may face setbacks, heartbreaks, or consequences from sinful choices, God is always in control, weaving everything into his divine tapestry. In the book of Job, another profound wisdom text, we see a similar theme of God's sovereignty over all things. Job suffers immense loss, yet he acknowledges that even in his suffering, God's sovereignty and purpose remain. Job 42:2 declares, "I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted." Proverbs echoes this, showing us that the consequences of sin and even the trials we face are never outside of God's sovereign reach. But Proverbs doesn't only focus on God's justice, it balances this with the theme of mercy. Proverbs 28:13 assures us, "Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy." God, in his sovereignty, offers a way back for the sinner. He doesn't leave us to suffer the consequences alone. His mercy is available to those who turn back to him, acknowledging their need for his grace. This mercy doesn't erase the natural consequences of sin, but it redeems them, bringing healing, forgiveness, and restoration to the one who repents. Think about what it means to know that God, in his sovereign power, is also abundantly merciful. Proverbs 3:11-12 tells us, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves. As a father, the son he delights in." God's discipline, even when it involves the painful consequences of sin, is motivated by love. He corrects and guides us not to punish, but to restore, leading us back to a path that aligns with his will. In his sovereignty, he uses every consequence, every hardship, to refine us, teach us, and deepen our relationship with him. This is the paradox of Proverbs' teaching on sin and God's sovereignty. While sin brings consequences, God uses even those consequences for our good. He is a God who transforms ashes into beauty, who brings life from death. Proverbs 16:9 captures this beautifully. "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." Even when we stray, God establishes a way back. He is the God of second chances, of redemption, and of restoration. Have you experienced consequences from choices or actions that you now regret? Are there areas where sin has led to pain, and you wonder if anything good can come from it? Proverbs encourages us to bring these experiences to God, to trust that his sovereignty is greater than our failures. He can use every mistake, every consequence to teach us, to bring us closer to him, and to reveal his grace in ways we never imagined. As we close, reflect on the journey Proverbs invites us to take. Are you ready to embrace wisdom as a way of life, to live with integrity, humility, and reverence for God? This wisdom transforms us from the inside out, shaping us into people who honor God not just with words, but with every action. If this journey through Proverbs has spoken to you, consider sharing these truths with others. Here on Deep Bible Stories, we're dedicated to uncovering the hidden wisdom of Scripture, revealing the depth of God's love and purpose for every one of us. If you've been blessed by this exploration, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who are seeking God's truth. Proverbs reminds us that wisdom isn't just for us. It's something to be shared, a light that can guide others toward God's love and redemption. Remember, as Proverbs teaches us, true wisdom begins with a heart that reveres the Lord. May this wisdom guide you, and lead you into a life of joy, peace, and unwavering trust in God. Stay blessed.